Hey, morning everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara with me, Peter Giblett. And this morning, as always, this week, is Mike Cushman. How are you, Mike?
Good. Good morning, Niagara. How are you today?
Um, okay, so tell us what's the update on that spill that you've been following all week?
Oh,
Have they
I
gotten
had
to the
some.
bottom of it?
I had somebody checking the ditch yesterday, and there's still oil going in there. So there's still being a release. Um, I heard it's not as big as it was this time, but it's still being a release because there's still oil in that pond after they vacuumed it out, right?
Yeah.
Um, so apparently the
Does that
city.
get I don't know about these things, but it occurs to me sometimes things like oil get stuck on the riverbanks or something and then get washed down later on, or is that not possible?
Yeah, it's possible, but I think they're really concentrating on trying to find the source first before they really address anything else.
Okay.
And The city has to work in conjunction with the MECP to try and trace it in the sewers. It's not an easy task, I guess.
Yeah, no, and so what happens is it comes in the sewers in the Don Murray area, and then goes into, then basically just gets put into the river. Is that right?
Yeah, there seems to be some kind of a sewer for the wastewater treatment plant, and then
Oh, is this?
a
Yeah. Okay.
separate
So
one
this
for
is
this, right?
Yeah.
And
This is the street. This is the street water, isn't it?
Yes, but now it's bringing into question because we've found two separate incidents in 1 year out of the same pipe where something's been released into the Welland River. So you have to ask, how often is this happening now, right? So
Yeah.
I'm asking the government to monitor it or shut the pipe down, one or the other. And I'm also asking
Or
the government.
or yeah, or divert that pipe into the normal sewage outflow system.
Something has to be done because obviously there is a problem with this being connected to the industrial area. And the other problem is they want to put, concentrated housing in this area now, right? And it just shows you
Yeah.
what a
Well,
danger it is of putting housing close to industry.
that's actually another reason why I say it needs to be piped away. I'm not, I know normally surface water runoff, you want it to go into rivers and streams, but not if it's polluted, potentially polluted.
Yeah, yeah. And
And
it
and
seems.
is there my next question also would be, is there some form of filtration system that could be put in and that could be that could be put in and paid for by the commercial properties on Don Murray
Yeah, the
as a
filters would
collection?
have to be made for what specific chemicals you're dealing with, right? And
Yeah,
right now this might be an accident or it could be dumping, one or the other, right?
yeah.
um I'm I always, you always err on the side of it's an accident, hoping that people aren't that moronic to pour into the Welland River on purpose. But if
Well,
it's
I
not an
would hope
accident,
so.
I hope they throw the book at them.
Yeah, that's exactly the way I feel. If it's if it's not an accident, somebody really should go to jail for it.
I believe so. And the other big problem here, Peter, is the MECP closed on weekends.
Yeah, that bothers me. That we get this 9 to 5 attitude, and I
That's
bet
very.
that I bet that it's they're putting their cap on and marching off the site at 5 o'clock as well, aren't they?
It's very problematic because a disaster doesn't recognize time. Disaster
Yeah.
doesn't recognize property zones. Um, all these things that are happening. This is proving that the Auditor General said about a year and a half to 2 years ago that the ministry was not capable of handling a hazardous spill because they're cut so short-handed, and this is
Yeah.
just proving the point.
Well, do they? It sounds like they need to recruit additional staff, and they need to get some weekend working done.
They have to work around the clock. Hazardous waste does not have a clock,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
um, if there's an emergency on the weekend, what's going to happen to us?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a frightening
Exactly.
situation right now that I think we're in, and it's not good.
Well, and this is actually okay. So one of the things we talked about on here was the potential that you could end up with, that many jobs could end up with a 4-day work week. God forbid that would happen to the ministry. But that said, we might be better if we did have a 4-day work week where you work 4 days on, 4 days off, 4 days on, 4 days off. At least you get continual coverage then, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I've worked the 4-day work week. It's really nice, you know. And if you work overtime, you work 1 day, you still have 2 days off. It's a really good thing, right? But again, with this ministry only being open 9 to 5, let's say, and then closed on weekends, I just can't believe this. I'm fearing for the public every day now.
Yeah,
I've put in a formal complaint to the federal government about it, and I'm hoping that they run with it and they do something about it.
yeah.
Because if the provincial MECP are failing the people, then who do we call when there's a problem? That's a serious issue.
Yeah. It is a very serious issue.
So we gotta wait for answers of the source, and we have to wait for answers to see what they're gonna do about it. And hopefully we could stop stuff going into the Welland River after it's happened twice in 1 year without really monitoring.
Yeah. Well, and does that mean that this is one of those locations that need to be monitoring, or are we in a situation whereby we don't do enough monitoring?
I believe we're both. I believe both, to tell you the truth. We're in a situation where the private sector basically polices itself. That's how our MECP runs, and I don't think it's right. I find it, if a for-profit company is policing itself and the bottom line is how much money am I making, you know, what response?
And basically it's not that you're not turning around and saying that, hey, every capitalist out there is a damn greedy bastard and deserves to be hung up and shot. What you're basically saying is that every once in a while, you'd like to believe that every once in a while, everybody, people slip. People make mistakes.
It's a mistake. I'm hoping it's a mistake. Yeah. I'm hoping that they thought they were dumping it into the wastewater treatment plant and they put it in the wrong spot. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
But
somebody knocked a barrel over on the, which emptied out on the road or something like that.
Yeah. So right now we're monitoring it ourselves to see if there is a specific time that this comes out, because then it would be somebody doing it on purpose, right?
Yeah.
Or it's a procedure happening and it's being overlooked. The material, Randy, is oil. It's an oil of some sort. It smells like oil, doesn't smell like a diesel or a gasoline.
So you've kind of put your hand in and picked it up and given it the taste test, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a petrol for sure, but it's not a gas or a diesel because it doesn't have those kind of odors, right?
Okay. All right.
And after it was festering for about a week, you could literally smell it when you were riding on the road once you hit a certain area, and it's a strong oil smell.
Okay. All right. Okay, there's another question up there. Soluble cutting oil.
Possibly. I wouldn't put it out of the question. It is an oil of some sort, and the sheen on the water shows, that it's an oil too, right?
So if I'm understanding this correctly, because I don't know what this is, soluble cutting oil is oil used when you've got a cutting blade of some kind operating in a shop.
Yeah, there could be cutting oils and coolant oils. There's coolants that are used that way. There's also, I think there's a place around there that fries chicken too, right? I believe, right?
I'll take your word for it. I wouldn't disbelieve it, because actually the last time I went to Don Murray, it had been 5 years. It'd been a 5 year gap since being there. And I found it's like, well, this wasn't here, this wasn't here, this
Yeah,
wasn't
there's a
here.
lot of little different industries in there, right?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
lot of things tucked away that you don't realize are there until you ride down there and go, holy, I didn't know that was there, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's like I thought I knew Don Murray because I used to go there probably. I used to go there probably 3 or 4 times a week at one point.
yeah.
Turns out I don't know that it changed in the 5 year gap.
Yeah, I worked there when it was Ed Shaw. So I went to Don Murray every day for a long time.
With the CNC machine shop just down the road on Don Murray.
Yeah, there's Bruner Manufacturing, and they've been there forever. And see, there's two pipes that come out of Don Murray Street, and
Yeah.
I think it's for each side of the road. You know what I mean? One's for one side of the road, the other's for the other side of the road, for each ditch, right? And they got catch basins, and I think they said 6 to 8 factories attached to those catch basins, something like that.
Well, when it becomes an industrial area like that, and let's be very, very honest, there is no heavy industry there, right? There might be chemical creating places there, but there's no heavy industry. So it's not the heavy industry types of pollutants we're talking about.
Well,
It's
there's
more
a concrete facility there. There's also a mold injection facility there. So there are some different types of chemicals that could be going in there.
I get that. I get that because each of those have their own chemical.
And there's Marine Clean. Marine Clean is up the street that deals with all different types of chemicals. So that's another place, right? And if there's a fuel depot for somebody, that's another thing you have to look at. Do they fuel up at a certain spot, right?
There is a fuel depot, I believe, down there. At least there used to be. The other one is Air Liquid, of course, that used to be.
Yeah, and don't forget there are markers in gasolines and oils where they could basically trace the DNA of where the gas or oil came from if it is a petrol.
Yeah. And through that, you could probably find the people who actually buy that stuff.
I'm hoping that will work, but testing takes a long time because there could be different contaminants you're dealing with, and it's a really tricky thing.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. There was an article in yesterday's review, basically saying respected philanthropist and Niagara Falls business person has been honored by Serbia. And Serbia's one of these nations that used to have these 3 words in front of it: former Yugoslav Republic.
Well, how much money did he funnel into Serbia to get his name on something like this?
Oh, cynic. And the gentleman is Serbia, Canada. So Serbia, Canada. The postage stamp says Serbia, Canada, 100 years since the birth of Milmar Glavic. And basically, Milmar Glavic is essentially being contributed because he actually said he was humbled and honored by the gesture. Everybody has a duty to support your community. I'd like to help everyone everywhere. And I get a great deal of personal enjoyment from it, is what Mr. Glavic has said. I actually used to know his daughters who were actually Toastmaster members at one point, right? Serbians. Okay, so he's one of 2 living Serbians found to be featured on stamps. The other being tennis star Novak Djokovic.
Djokovic, yeah.
Yeah, Djokovic, yeah. Never know how to pronounce some of these names. Basically what they're saying is Glavic is well respected in the Niagara area. And he's essentially he donated more than 10 million euros to Kraljevo to build a bridge, renovate and build schools, pave roads, and provide medical equipment to improve hospitals and buy ambulances.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, that's but that was also, if you think about it, back in the 90s, that was a very much a war-torn area when Yugoslavia fell apart.
Yes, yes.
And obviously places, places like Serbia, places like Bosnia, places like Montenegro, all had their own problems, and there was a lot when Yugoslavia fell apart. Of course, that whole area was ravaged by war.
Well, that'd be quite an honor to have the ability to help the place you grew up in with that much money. What a nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can applaud. And that's often, when we kind of do come across these stories, we, Jave and I generally go and applaud whoever's done the work like this, right? Because I think it is a good thing.
Well, don't we all imagine if we got rich, what we would do with the money, and hopefully it would be something selfless, right? And
well, I can see what a Mike Cushman would do with the money would be to make sure there was no pollution on the Welland River and ensure that there were all the traps on all of the industries around here, and probably he'd put a nice chunk to cleaning up the former cyanamide plant.
I think I would open up a lab for environmentalists. I think that's what I would do. I feel from here to Ottawa, you can't trust any of the labs because all the rich corporations and governments have put their money into it. So when someone like me or you has a conflict with an idea and want to get it tested, and they already got $1 billion contract with the company you're arguing with.
Couldn't you take blind samples in there?
No, with the law, the way it's written, they want to know where you got it from, and if you got it from someplace you trespassed from, then they usually don't want to help you.
Okay, so you couldn't say it came from a deep hole in your back garden.
I've done that a couple times, but they always look at you with a suspicious look on your face and don't believe a word you're saying, right?
Yeah. Well, we had, when I was living in farm in Grimsby area, I had to get the well water tested one time.
Yes.
Yes. And that's a common thing anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. 1 minute. My grandson just woke up. I'll be right back.
All right. No, not a problem. All right. So let's move off of that subject. And okay, so Glavich and his wife basically recently donated 1.7 million towards the construction of the Serbian Hall on Montrose Road, which features sporting facilities and is a gathering place for the Niagara community, as well as a place for Serbians to unite and preserve their culture and heritage. I believe that's where the church is, isn't it? The Serbian Hall. Might well be. I might well be wrong. Yeah, basically, I was just saying he donated some money recently to the Serbian Hall on Montrose. I believe that's where the Serbian church is, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a nice facility, actually. I used to play soccer there. My daughter used to play soccer there. It's a nice facility.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just wonder how much our city honors that. I mean, I'd be all over it if I was a mayor, saying, wow, what a great job, right? Like,
yeah.
To have people from Niagara Falls to be able to help another country like that is something else.
Okay, so actually, I think the city has honored it insofar as in 2015, Kraljevo, Serbia was twinned with Niagara Falls during a ceremony in City Hall with the mayor and with the two respective mayors. And twinning is normally done in recognition of something like that. Often done in recognition of either business partnerships or people that have, people that have done good for both cities.
And I applaud it again. I mean, if you're making millions of dollars and you're being selfless with your money, that's how you should be. I think that's the way we all should be. If you get rich, you should be able to help somebody down the road somewhere, right?
Yeah, you can't take the money with you.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point, right? Like, if you're a Burgermeister burger, I think you pay the price in the long run.
Well, you see yeah, and yeah, okay, exactly. All right. So apparently he moved to Canada in the 50s. Yeah, it was typical, I think, of a lot of that Serbian community would have come out here probably during that same time.
Yeah, it's a spectacular thing, really, right?
And if you look across the whole of Niagara, we're actually a large Balkan community here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm Ukrainian. I'm Ukrainian, so it's pretty close. Ukrainian, Romanian.
Okay, well, I didn't know that. And of course, Cushman's such an English type name.
Well, it's English too. English on my father's side, Ukrainian, Romanian on my mom's.
And of course, that is the one thing, had your family come to Britain, the chances are they wouldn't necessarily have, that Ukrainian, they may have intermarried with English people, but they wouldn't, the Ukrainian heritage wouldn't necessarily have stayed there.
Yeah, my great grandmother came right from the Ukraine, spoke like 10 different languages. It was awesome.
I'm always in awe of people who speak multiple languages.
Yeah, as she got older, she started to mix them all up in one sentence. It started to get a little confusing.
So you had to speak 10 languages to understand her as she got older.
She made a wicked hottie toddy.
Well, my mother-in-law spoke about 6. And one of the things she always used to say to me, in perfect English, I don't speak very good English.
Yeah, but wow, what smart people to be able to speak that many different languages.
But, and it's well, yeah, I think you have a special type of, you see, I can recognize a lot of languages. I can recognize where people come from by how they speak English, and a lot of the languages that they mix in with their English use. You know how if you come across a family that's from France, they may be speaking English, but they're speaking Franglish more than English, right?
Yes.
And and the same with like somebody, they may be speaking, if they come from Serbia, they'll be speaking Serbian and Serbian English mix, and they mix it and blend it in a particular way. But I've always, I can manage to identify where a lot of people come from that way. But I'm often spectacularly wrong.
Can you tell the difference between a Quebec French and a France French?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the words that they use. For example, if you go to City Hall in Welland, you'll find a plaque, the plaque for the City Hall, in which the French one reads something de Centreville, right? Which is technically correct as city center, but you go to France, you will never find that. You'll never find that sign at any city hall.
Right.
Right, because in France they're called Hotel de Ville.
Right.
Right. And that's the terminology that shows the difference in the progression of the language between when it first came here to North America and how it is developed in France.
Yeah, I don't even think that the French people in France recognize the French in Quebec, do they?
No, I've heard. Well, before I
Consider it
came to
slang or
before I came to Canada, I had heard people who said that those people in Quebec don't speak French.
yeah.
I'd heard French people say that.
Yeah, so
But
what is it considered, like a slang?
no, it's because what it is much of Quebec French has gone on. It's like English. English has spoken in England, and English has spoken in many parts of the USA. If you think about many of those families, much of the culture that came to the USA, predominantly, and the same with Quebec, predominantly came here in the 16th and 16th and 17th centuries, and the language has taken a different path in both those places since then. For example, for example, when they invented the motor car in Britain, they would have used, it's like we use trunk, boot, right?
Right,
Because they came up with different terminology independently in order to manage to figure out what the various parts of the car were.
right,
Right. And had that, which shows that basically you've got two parts of the world using the same thing, but calling it different things,
right,
and boot to trunk and bonnet to hood,
right.
right? To concept, there's two different concepts there, and I guess that it's about where that history comes from and how that is used, and that's of course used in that's one of the problems you get also in Quebec French.
Well, and then you could look at New Orleans French, right?
Well, New Orleans French, as I understand it, and I'm happy to have somebody tell me I'm wrong, I understand New Orleans French is actually very related to Quebec French,
Yeah, makes sense.
right?
Same people were discovering it at the same time, right? It makes sense.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, at one time there used to be trade routes there used to be like portage ways between Quebec and New Orleans. In
Right,
fact, actually, the province of we and if you wind the clock back, we would be living in the province of Quebec, as would be our American friends on the other side of the river, because the province of Quebec extended from Quebec quite a long distance south into, south of Ohio and probably what's the next? Probably into Pennsylvania
right.
at one time, or on the western provinces of the western sides of those states. I don't know exactly how far it went, but if you look at older maps, you can see the 13 colonies dotted along the coast, and the next bit inland from there is the Blue Quebec colony, which extended quite far south.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, quite the history.
Yeah, and it also extended almost as far as like the East Coast. It extended further east than Quebec does today.
Yes.
Right. But of course, that all changed during the French and as a result of the French and Indian Wars.
Yes.
Right. But okay. Okay, so moving on, we talked about that. We've talked about that spill, and I'm hoping that's getting resolved. I'm keeping my fingers crossed and everything that we can get that done. Right.
Yeah, we got quite a few volunteers now. We're going to monitor it ourselves if the ministry can't, and we're going to see if we could see if there's a time release, if there's a
Yeah.
specific time it gets released, and maybe which pipe it's coming out of. So it might help them zero in on, because there's two pipes coming out of Don Murray, right? So if we could figure out which one, maybe it could zero in on which side of the road it's coming from type thing and help them zero in on it, right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
we're going to do our best to help them out if we can.
Yeah. Well, but actually, I have to ask about that. Do they, is the ministry, because I've heard of many of these experts in that kind of area kind of say, yeah, what do you know? You're just a member of the public.
Yeah, they could say that. But see, last Wednesday, the ministry went out and couldn't find the source.
Yeah.
I went out there Saturday and I found the source in 10 minutes. So there's my answer.
Yeah. Well, and I say it's foolish to actually ignore local experts. And I say expert because whilst you may not have an environmental degree or something, you're an expert because you know the area and you know what to look out for.
Yeah, I think 35 years of study in the topic brings you up to some caliber, and I think I've proven to all the city councilors and everybody I've spoken to over the years that I never mislead anybody, and a lot of the things I have said have come true. So they can't deny that.
Yeah, and probably there's a possibility that in a particular spill like that, and I'm not saying this would necessarily be the case, but you could take me down there, or you could show me something, and I'd be going, "What? I can't see it."
Yes.
Right?
Well, even I'll give you, for instance, the first time the ministry went down and said they didn't see any oil in that stream, I bet you they looked from above, standing on the bridge that the thing goes under, and you can't see the sheen of oil unless you get down on an angle so that the sun's hitting it at a perfect angle so you can see the sheen. So I bet you they stood on that bridge, looked down, didn't see the sheen, and said nothing's there. They didn't climb down like I did and go right into the tunnel, and then you can see the sheen. So that's just an example of that, right?
Yeah, and the thing is that I think it takes a level of expertise. As I said, you could probably, and I might even get partway down into the thing before actually seeing it. I'd have to be almost nose onto the surface to actually see it, probably.
And what I actually did was I know where every release point is on that Welland River along Dorchester Road. There's pipes and there's streams and little streams that release into the Welland River. I know where all those pipes and streams are. So by process of elimination, I went through all of them to find where the release was.
Yep. Fair comment. All right. Okay. So the other question, we were talking earlier on this week about transportation. We were also talking about housing related problems. Well, we actually didn't really get too much into housing, other than the fact that we were talking about these buildings that were not being built.
Yes.
So if we had buildings that were not being built, I think many of those sites that were proposed for buildings to be put on, I think most of us would say they would be deserving of some form of building or other. Do we, one of the problems I have with what we call city planning is that we don't plan our cities at all. Right? Realistically, what happens is on a plot by plot basis, a developer comes up with a bright idea and they build whatever, if that bright idea fits in with general city principles, they build that idea. Would you concur?
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like this city was not made for 150,000 people. The city's not made for 100,000 people,
Yeah, we have 100,000 people right now.
And giving an example, first they built around the factories, right? Now the factories are gone, right?
Yeah.
So now they got to fill in that space.
But we've got this. I've got this new thing that's come through and talking about that. So the factories are gone, and what's going to replace them? There's a 4280 4th Avenue official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application. Hey, you familiar with that address?
Oh, yes.
Right, which is going to be held at City Hall on Monday, July 22nd at 4:30 p.m. Because I'm getting this notice because I'm within 120 meters of this place.
Right.
Right. And basically, they're looking at a special policy area to permit permit a density of 100 units per hectare on this local road. Right. Well, I'm not have a problem with 100 units per hectare. What I have the problem with is actually how contaminated is that land.
Very.
Right.
Very
Yeah.
contaminated.
Because essentially that's next to the former car park of Cyanamid, isn't it?
Yeah, and I got a friend that's a biologist, chemist. And the man's a genius, and he says there's such a complex variety of chemicals on that property that nobody in the world can guess what that all becomes when it's mixed together.
Yeah. And actually, so these are going to be essentially, I think these are townhouses, what they're talking about. You're talking about one row, well, essentially a road going in and 3 rows on the south side and 2 roads on the north, 2 rows of houses on the north side. Actually, we could be talking about, okay, so we could be talking about some that front onto 4th Avenue that have bigger lots than those. I'm not sure exactly what I'm seeing here, but I think I'm seeing a combination of larger and smaller lots.
It's a pretty scary thing when 30 years ago they were saying all we could do is plant trees on it and cap it with 3 feet of clay and leave it alone for 35 years. And they never did that. And now they're building. It's
Yeah.
a very frightening thing that they're doing. And they've already built on the old YMCA 4th Avenue site. And they put the cart before the horse on that one, eh?
Yeah, and this is directly opposite the former Y site.
Right.
You know, the roads, the access road might not be, might not be directly there linked, but that's a problem.
Yeah, right? and even right now on that property, they've taken all contaminated soil that they've found from all over the place and piled it on that property, and it's been sitting there ever since they dug up the First Avenue Bridge Street site. So they've contaminated those properties even more, and now they want to build housing on it.
Yeah,
they don't make sense. They're not making sense on any of their decisions, and they're bull rushing everything. And they know what they're doing. They're bull rushing it on purpose.
The irony is, when we were there was a planning amendment application that was put in by the city for the lot. The plot of land that went across to my back garden, ironically, from 4th Avenue. Where they were talking about change of use from commercial to residential, and essentially we're talking about no, there was no cleanup issue about that, but then the other one was actually up on there's another parcel up on Stanley Avenue as well. So essentially they passed that the second time of passing, right? And that this is now the consequence of that.
Yeah, and the last conversation I heard from City Hall on that was if they find contamination, they're going to clean it up. And it was a really loose statement. I already know when they get onto the Milik rink, they're going to find some heavy contamination.
Yeah. So they said they were going to cap it for 35 years. When was that?
In 1992, they sent out to the people that lived in Fifth Avenue, like where you live, Peter. They sent
Yeah.
out in people's mailboxes the plan of capping the whole area with a 3-foot layer of clay and planting proper vegetation that would help suck up some of the contamination and leave it alone for a minimum of 35 years. And they never ended up capping it with clay because Cyanamid put in an appeal that if you capped it with a 3-foot layer of clay, it would come within the distance of the hydro lines to the ground would come into play. And so they didn't win their appeal on that, but they ended up pausing it enough to get away with what they got away with.
But okay, so we are at currently 33 years.
Yeah, and they never capped it. They never ever capped it with clay.
Yeah.
They never did it. So it was a fallacy to make the MECP go away. They acted like they had a plan, and their actual plan was just to sit on the land and put pressure on the city to change it.
But part of the problem that lies with any of this lot is actually how we as a city are forced to actually pick up the tab and actually sort the problem out.
A huge problem throughout all of Canada and Ontario, where we allow companies to just close up and walk away. There's no liabilities for 100 years of flagrant pollution.
But again, arguably that is, okay, so that is also true probably in the US, probably also true in a lot of like Western Europe as well, and probably even more true in places like Mexico, Brazil, and Russia and China.
Yes, well, remember the book that was written that I was in on industrial ruination, and it basically talked about all that and compared it all, and it even compared the downfall of the Industrial Revolution and everything. It was identical throughout the world what they did.
Yeah, and the problem, as I said, people just walk away. And now, okay, so when a company walks away, that one could argue they made enough profit out of the place that they should have a duty to clean up. One could argue that the potential also is that, hey, that was a thing of the past. One could argue that was a thing of the past, and as they did everything according to the law as it was at the time, and therefore they shouldn't be held responsible.
Yeah, well,
I'm just putting that out.
I understand that argument, but when
I'm not saying I believe.
When you flagrantly when you buried toxins all over the city and you said to the city that it was clean fill, it wasn't clean fill. So the dishonesty that happened should have some sort of, we should learn from it is what we should do. We should start having processes of a contingency fund before a factory even starts, where the government and the companies put money in, leave it in the bank, so there's a cleanup process at the end. We should start learning from the past.
Especially if we're doing heavy industry.
Yes, and it's a contingency fund. You maybe put $100,000 each into the fund and leave it there, let it collect interest. And when the place closes, you got a cleanup fund,
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I get that, hey, when you're building a plant, you've just spent $20 million building the plant. The last thing you have right now is money to put it up into a cleanup fund, right?
Well, it should also be done by the government. I don't think it should be industry only. I think these are things that should be planned together and work together.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is if you put a block of money per year into that cleanup fund, that was an agreed amount per year. So, for example, that what you were saying, if you put $100,000 a year into the cleanup fund for the cyanamide plant, way back when, that would be worth a bundle of money right now, and you'd easily have the money to clean it up.
Have a good day. Yeah, I think we have to do something like that. We have to learn from our past mistakes, right? And if you want to progress further and you want to
And
get industry involved, you got to work with them, right?
yeah,
So you got to come up with plans that are going to work well with each other and with the public.
okay. So one thing Randy says is once you know, and that becomes part of the problem. Yeah, because in fact, when you know a problem exists and it's a problem, you've got to do something. You can't just say shh and find somebody like Gary Wilkins to to deal with the problem. You've got to actually face it head on and deal with the problem out publicly.
Yes, and like Randy says, these places went to Mexico and China because they have less safety standards or whatever the issues are that make it more lucrative to do business there, right? And
Yeah.
we should learn from that. I mean, we got to learn from those mistakes, and instead of saying we don't want you here, we say we want you here, but we want to be progressive about the ideas with what we understand from the past, right?
Yeah.
And we understand that contamination is going to happen, so we should address that issue before it even
Well,
happens.
and like you were saying in relation to what we were talking about contaminants, you were talking about Don Murray, but it would apply to any plant. If you're in a situation whereby the potential is you create a contaminant through the industrial process of your plant, first of all, we should the parties involved should be looking at what are the possibilities that we can actually that
Use the
contaminant
byproduct.
is use our byproduct that's a contaminant, but is that an input product to another plant, and could we
Yes.
essentially bring another plant here that brings more jobs here to the local area?
That's exactly what you should do, Peter. Is you get a factory that suggests they want to do work here. You ask them what their byproduct is, and you place another factory beside it that uses that byproduct, and
Yeah.
so on until you end up with almost nothing left. And those
Yeah.
are the things we should learn from the past, right? And
And every industry has a byproduct. Every industry has a byproduct, and you think, okay, my byproduct soapy water, but hey, soapy water has, soapy water could be used by somebody. You don't know, right?
right, or a
Maybe
phosphate. If it
yeah,
was a phosphate in the soapy water, then you could use the phosphate somehow. Like emissions, right? When emissions are given off, sometimes acetylene's in there. You could take the acetylene out and use the acetylene, right? There's different types of things that we know we could do, and that's the way they should do our processes from now on.
and okay, so Karen makes the point that right now Walker Industries promises to beautify the gravel pit when they are done in 50 years. And they're just filling the pit, and that doesn't help the watershed that has been destroyed.
Yeah, we're not
That
talking about a cosmetic beautification of something. I think we really need to get to the roots of what we know problems are with industry and address them.
Yeah. And Randy makes also the point that our mayor and council are not in any position to afford the cleanup of these, afford to clean up these areas on their own, which takes this to provincial and federal levels of involvement, which brings in more red tape and more closures. And yeah, and again, why the heck are we building? Why the heck are we looking at building? Building 100 homes on this area at 4310 Queen. No, sorry, at on 4th Avenue. I don't have the address for. Oh yeah, 4280 4th Avenue.
Well, I watch as our city council always says we need industrial areas to build on, and there's your industrial area to build on.
Yeah, you
I
just
don't know why they don't do it. You know what I mean? It's obviously contaminated. It's obvious that they can't clean it up. Like Randy says, they can't afford to. They were left with the garbage, right? And here's my problem. Like Randy says, the government shouldn't be left with the bill, right? The
Yeah.
government should never be, the taxpayers shouldn't be the ones paying for this, right? We paid for it through the diseases we got already.
Yeah,
But
and the other question is like what you said, if there was a 50-50 fund that was built over the years, so each part the government puts in N dollars, the corporation puts in N dollars in preparation for that site to be cleaned at the end of the day.
yes, and the other problem is that companies shouldn't be able to walk away.
And well, the other question also is that that even if this company closes down and another company takes the site over, or there's a purchase of the company, that agreement transfers to the new company, and that requirement transfers to the new company.
Yeah, and well, we got Cyanamid and then Cytec on
But
Welland
you
is the
see,
Cyanamid company. We
yeah,
have General Motors that never shut down. So when these companies want to sell some of their property that's contaminated and they're still here, we should be able to make them pay for the damage they've done somehow. And I give a for instance, if they dig up contaminated soil from 4th Avenue, they should just put it right over on Gartner Road and let the Cyanamid company deal with the contamination and let them pay for it. So if they dig up a site on 4th Avenue and they find cyanamid contamination, put the soil right on Gartner Road and let them have to pay for it. And
you
the
mean
reason,
dump it? You mean dump it in the front driveway of Cytec?
you say, here you go. This is your responsibility. Same with GM. The GM site in St. Catharines, Better St. Catharines has been fighting forever. Just dig up the PCBs and put it on the GM property, and you got to deal with it in a proper manner. Here you go. Let them pay for it. They're not gone. They're still here.
Yeah.
They haven't run away. So I don't understand why we're not doing that.
So Lisa Duchesne, good morning all. Yep, good morning, Lisa.
Morning.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see we're getting out there to a lot of people, and I think it's good. I haven't got Robert DePal on YouTube this morning, but we're live on Talking Niagara on Facebook, and we're live on YouTube right now. Okay. So the other thing we never really got off the development subject, because we've still got probably acres where there's been agreed development but nothing done. So surely what we need to be dealing with there, and I know there's a land ownership issue, but if they I actually wonder whether what we need to do is, if a developer forfeits on a property, the potential is there that they could forfeit the actual land that they own.
So what? Find another developer?
So that we could then find another developer.
That's an interesting concept, but I think the 70-story building and the 75-story building are by the same developers, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that.
And that's the hole in the wall. That's the hole in the ground on Ferry and Stanley, right? So
yeah.
So if they're both the same
think
owners, we're already in trouble before we start the 75-story building.
Yeah, and that's a fair comment. And the question though really becomes one of, how do we get people to be? And part of the thing, we lost money this year because we are not getting the housing starts. We've gotten the planning, and putting aside that you and I or anybody else on the city may object to any individual building that's planned. We talked about the stupidity of the 77 floor high rise. But again, there's a difference between planning and execution, and we're not executing.
No, they're not executing, again, because they didn't do any stress tests on the people that they've allowed to do the development. And those people have either paused because interest rates have gone up, or they didn't have the money to begin with, and now they're waiting for people to invest into the new buildings to run with the money, which is the wrong way to do it.
And Randy West makes the point that the bylaw states that the city can recover the property in taxes or in reclamation.
It's probably a long process then.
Yeah, it probably is. But again, could one, it probably is. But again, the challenge here, the challenge here is we need to get some building done.
Well, if we use Dunn Street and Stanley Avenue as an example of what Randy just said, why haven't they done that with that property yet?
Well, that property's been an eyesore for 25 years, nearly 25 years.
That's what I'm saying. So if the city could do a reclamation like that, why haven't they done that with this property and move forward? Because that's been stagnant, and I fear is an example of what Randy just said of what the city's not doing.
Yeah. And what basically needs to happen with that property is they need to go through the entire sub basement and dynamite the whole frigging lot.
I believe so, because from what I've been told by some cement truck drivers, that building's not strong enough to build on.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's basically a building like that is basically built on the single poor principle, and the single poor principle doesn't mean to say that that you're going to build the whole building in a day and a half, but essentially what is happening, you lay the concrete for the basement, you're laying the foundation, you're putting in the foundations for the first floor and how that first floor all goes together. And then as they're pouring the first floor, you're building the second floor, etc., etc. So continuous poor buildings may still take 2 or 3 years to build, but they're slowly pouring concrete in each of the sectors in order to build up that entire building. But at the end of the day, you end up with a structure that is absolutely solid and works and moves together, because all buildings move.
Yeah, and can you imagine having the basement built 25 years into, take 25 years for the top to get finished, and by the time that happens, the basement needs the preventative maintenance already,
The only thing you can do is to basically go down in the depths of that basement, drill a whole load of holes in there, stick dynamite in there, and let's have a spectacular bang that drops it into the floor.
And then watch all the sky rises on the escarpment go into the river.
Okay, so that building was proposed at 25 MPa concrete strength when it was designated 35 MPa. Something likely could be redesigned. However, trust is out of the window.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a big thing. And I think one of the things we were talking also about in that regard was how the hell we get people to work.
Yeah.
Right. Because to a large extent, we were talking about that concept of transit route related housing, and getting, if that were a brand new hotel, then we need to get people to work to it.
Yeah, another huge problem, right?
Yeah. And you see, if the amount of square footage, and don't get me wrong, the amount of square footage that 77 floor building were laid out as a factory, it wouldn't be on a big stack like that, of course. But if you're bringing in a factory of that size, that square footage, you'd be into thousands, if not tens of thousands of workers to support it. But with the hotel, you've probably not got more than about 150 or 200 workers in it.
Yeah, that's true. But don't forget, there's a lot of runoffs from that, right? Electricians, You know, you got elevator workers, you got a whole lot of different types of work that is indirectly connected to that. So there's a lot of little runoff jobs too, right?
Yeah. So Randy's saying Victor Peterangelo has stated that the council would prefer to find another option rather than start from scratch.
Well, that's a simple statement, but what if you have no choice? I don't think you have any choice.
Yeah. I think that's
Randy said once you've lost public trust, you know, once you've lost that public trust, that you're not going to get it back very easily unless you do something proper to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that public trust, you know, particularly with that site of Stanley and Dunn, I think there's no public trust in that site.
Well, they're losing it more by having the development in Chippewa gone, the other development on Stanley and Ferry gone. You're going to be able to follow Portage Road and see a disaster.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we you know, whatever you might say about this, okay, after 25 years, it's the time to start from scratch. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely. 100%.
I agree.
Yeah. Drop it to the floor, get rid of it. And
then you'll have somebody rubbing their hands together saying, look how lucrative that property is.
Yeah, exactly. If it's dropped to the floor, we can actually do something with it.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
And it won't be, and even if you bulldoze it all, it won't be such an eyesore.
Yes. Yes. It's right there.
Yeah.
The first building you come into.
Yeah. And it's actually, and I, you know, I 100% agree that we need to develop that lot.
Yes.
I think if you talk to most people in the know in this city, there's probably not a single person who wouldn't have some idea about what we need to do with that lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Those ideas would differ, and that could be the subject of another discussion. But hey,
I think a good beginning would be to mow it down.
Yeah, exactly. That's where we must start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But let's get it done. You know, let's get it done. Let's get it down. Let's you know, let's let the next developer look at a plan. Let's not have another. You know, we want to plan a realistic plan, not a Jim's folly.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
I always looked at that and I thought, this is Jim Diodati's folly.
I don't know if that one was, but it is one of the ugliest things that the city's ever witnessed.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying the original building, the new concept that they were going to put in there.
Yeah.
Is a massive folly.
Yes.
Anyway, so you know, that's an important thing. Okay, so Zappy's Pizza Land has been rezoned to allow for a skyscraper right beside the Stanley Avenue concrete mountain. Yep. I know, I was conscious of that as well, Randy. But again, that's a recent development proposal. So wasn't coming into the category of you know, planned but not you know, approved but not yet developed.
So is it the Zappatellis or the Monticellos that are going to do Loretto Academy? Who's doing that one? I forget.
Yeah, don't know.
So I'm just saying,
there's not been a spade in the ground on that property.
Yeah, there's a lot of drawings.
Yeah, we've all seen the drawings. Yeah, we've all seen the drawings. I hate some of the things that I see going up there, especially since I'd love to see us preserve some of the former, the former building.
So are you kidding me? The history on that property is incredible, and there's no way they should mow down those old buildings.
No, exactly. And and I don't like us mowing down old buildings.
And if they're gonna, I'm gonna ask if I could go get the wood in there.
Yeah, okay. That's probably worth a fortune.
Oh yeah.
It'll help you build dozens of canes, won't it?
There's some beautiful wood. There's some beautiful wood in that building, man.
The trouble is, Mike, where you're going to put the wood, because as soon as you put it in your driveway, the bylaw officer is going to be going around and saying, this isn't right. And it'll be Mr. Mike Cushman that gets the bylaw ticket. So
yeah, $1,000
to the city, cha-ching, cha-ching, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it would be a buy and sell thing, I think, with that kind of wood. That's some really old, beautiful wood in those buildings.
Well, there's actually, and there are places that, I don't think they should come down. I think that at the very minimum, if you're going to if you're going to put something there, you keep the skin.
Yeah, I believe you got to preserve that history no matter what.
Yeah, yeah, and okay, much of those places are not used today, but let's get them used today.
Yes.
Right? It's do something with them, because it's the doing nothing that's causing the problem. Anyway, we're gone 8 o'clock, so we kind of past our time. And
yep.
Well, I'll be looking at, think about some subjects of some local stuff that we can think about next week. If any of the listeners have got some, I'd happily hear it, and we can go do some research. Randy, the problems with our city all trace back to a council who is not counselling the development in our area. Our council is flopping like fish to get anything going at all. Just like getting anything, just to get something happening. Yeah, and that's part of the problem we have.
Yeah, they don't seem to have any power to make anything happen.
Yeah, and hey, I'm not so sure I like to remove Zappy's Pizza, but hey, if they're going to build something with it, and if it's going to be good for the community, I'm all in favor of that.
Yeah, and I'm sure Zappy's Pizza will be incorporated into the building.
Yeah, that's exactly what I believe. There will be a Zappy's Pizza. At the end of the day, once you're in 5 years down the line, there'll be a Zappy's Pizza right there on that spot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's no worry about there being the continuance of Zappy's Pizza. It's a case of making that work.
Their whole franchise started with Zappy's Pizza, and then they ended up with those hotels. So no, they'll never get rid of that pizzeria.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, absolutely. I think we can agree upon that. And everybody, not everybody, a lot of people in the city love Zappy's.
Yep. My wife's one of them.
I wouldn't be surprised. Would not be surprised at all to hear that. All right. Okay. So I think we can kind of call it quits for today, and thank everybody for being here. And we'll come back with something for the, for Monday, and have a great